We need to talk about some of the darkest moments in U.S. military history. But this isn't just about listing things that happened. It's about a pattern, a disturbing cycle that we see repeat itself. An atrocity happens, it gets covered up, the truth slowly claws its way out, and then there's the question of accountability. Let's get into it.
Before we get into any of the history or the policy, we have to start right here, with the human cost. This is a quote from someone who survived the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. It's just a raw reminder of what's really at the heart of this entire story.
See, the key thing to understand is that these tragedies, they aren't just random, isolated events. They tend to follow this really predictable and, frankly, deeply disturbing cycle. It all starts with an atrocity that's almost immediately followed by an official cover-up. And then, eventually, the truth is revealed, which leads to this public and legal reckoning that is almost never what you'd expect. All right, so let's break down that first part of the pattern, this massive gap between what actually happens on the ground and what the public is told at first.
So on March 16, 1968, in a Vietnamese village called My Lai, American soldiers murdered up to 504 civilians. And let's be clear, these were not enemy fighters. They were overwhelmingly women, children, and old men. Entire families were just wiped out in their own homes.
So what was the official story that came out? Well, a completely different one. It was called a Great Victory. The report claimed 128 Viet Cong were killed. The unit was actually congratulated for its actions. The brutal reality of a massacre was just completely buried.
And look, if you're thinking, okay, that was Vietnam, that was a long time ago, well, think again. Decades later, in 2005, the exact same pattern, massacre and cover-up, popped up again, this time in a town in Iraq called Haditha.
Here's how it went down. A roadside bomb killed a U.S. Marine. The official story from the Marine Corps was that the bomb also killed 15 civilians and that 8 insurgents were killed in the firefight that followed. But the truth, which was later uncovered by journalists, was that Marines went house to house, killing 24 unarmed civilians, including a 3-year-old, at point-blank range.
So this leads to a huge question, right? If the official story is a complete lie, how does the real story ever see the light of day?
Well, the answer almost never comes from official channels. It comes from the courage of individuals, people who just decide they can't live with the silence anymore.
The truth only gets out because certain people refuse to let it be buried. We're talking about soldiers who are on the ground and disobeying an illegal order. It's veterans who are haunted by what they saw. It's journalists like Seymour Hersh who broke the My Lai story wide open. And of course, it's the survivors themselves, who somehow find the incredible strength to tell their story.
I mean, you want to talk about courage? Take the story of Hugh Thompson Jr. at My Lai. He was a helicopter pilot and he saw the massacre happening from the air. And he did something absolutely unthinkable. He landed his helicopter right in the middle of it all, between the American soldiers and the Vietnamese civilians. He then ordered his own crew to shoot the American soldiers if they didn't stop the killing. He literally put his life on the line to save strangers.
Okay, so the truth is out. But what happens then? Well, this brings us to the final and often the most frustrating part of the whole cycle, the hunt for some kind of justice. Just look at the timeline for My Lai. The massacre happens in March '68. It takes over a year and a half for the story to even break. After that whole investigation, 26 soldiers are charged, but only one is ever convicted, Lieutenant William Calley. And his sentence for a massacre? He served just 3.5 years, under house arrest. And the outcome for Haditha, it's just as bleak. You can see it right here. 8 Marines were charged. Out of those 8, only 1 was convicted. And as for actual jail time for the killing of 24 people, 0, not a single day. The one conviction was for negligent dereliction of duty, which basically means he was careless, and it just resulted in a pay cut and a lower rank. Now, for a moment, the 2007 Nicer Square massacre looked like it might be different. In that case, private military contractors from Blackwater opened fire in a busy square in Baghdad, killing 17 civilians. And in what seemed like a rare case of real accountability, 4 of them were actually convicted in a U.S. federal court. But then came the final twist. In 2020, all 4 of them were given full presidential pardons. Their convictions were just erased. So here's the kicker. Even when the legal system actually works and delivers a guilty verdict, accountability can still just disappear into thin air. You know, these aren't just isolated failures of justice. They are part of a very long history that brings up some really tough questions about whether we've learned anything at all. And this pattern, it's not new. It's over a century old.
During the Philippine-American War, a general ordered his men to turn an entire island into a howling wilderness. His explicit command was to kill every single male over the age of 10. And his punishment for giving that order? A formal reprimand. That's it, a slap on the wrist.
And of course, we saw the same dynamic with Abu Ghraib. The official story tried to pin the horrific torture on a few rogue soldiers at the bottom of the chain. But investigation after investigation showed that these so-called enhanced interrogation techniques were authorized from the very top. The result? 11 low-level soldiers were convicted, while the senior officials who created the policies that allowed it to happen never faced any charges.
So this is where we're left. We see this pattern, and it's been repeating for over 100 years. An atrocity is committed, it's covered up, there's a painful fight to get the truth out, and then the justice system almost never holds the most responsible people to account. Which leaves us with the biggest question of all. If this is the cycle, what could possibly break it?